Again, I would like to welcome you to today's session, Introduction to SQL Server 2005 Report Builder. I would like to introduce today's presenter, Carolyn Chow. Carolyn is a Senior Program Manager with SQL Server Reporting Services for the Microsoft Corporation. And without any further delay, I'll turn the floor over to Carolyn.
Thank you. As Tracy said, today we're going to be covering Report Builder, which is a new end-user query tool in SQL Server 2005. There's not too many prerequisites to this talk. This is basically an introduction talk, and what you'll need is just some familiarity with SQL Server 2005. So let's dive right in. So why is it that we decided to build Report Builder? If you look at reporting services, when we first released it in SQL Server 2000, we really targeted two different audiences with Reporting Services 2000. And if you look at the range of users out there, the broadest base of users of reports, any reports, are the report consumers. These are people who don't understand how to write their own reports, but they may receive and view reports either over the web or via email. And so these are folks who want to receive and consume information about reports. They may change a few parameters and be able to rerun a report, but they certainly are not the people who are authoring brand new reports. At the lower end, at the other extreme, they're the power users or developers. And these are folks who really understand the underlying databases. They know SQL, they know the database, the physical layout of the database. They understand how to pull information from the database by writing their own queries. They understand laying out reports and basically very fairly advanced capabilities of reports. In the middle are these business users who are interested in creating their own reports. They understand they have a business question, a business need that they want to answer. They don't necessarily know how to write direct SQL or any other query, but they understand their business requirements and they understand the type of report that they would like to generate. And with SQL Server 2000, we really targeted the two extremes, the consumers and the developers, but not necessarily the business users in the middle. So that's the reason why we went ahead and built Report Builder in SQL Server 2005. And for those of you who keep up with the Microsoft news, Report Builder is based off of a technology which we purchased called ActiveViews. So that's the feature that ActiveViews became. So what is Report Builder? Again, as I said, Report Builder is a new ad hoc report design tool. It comes with SQL Server 2005 only. You do need a SQL Server 2005 copy in order to use Report Builder. However, you can go ahead and use Report Builder against a SQL Server 2000 database, but you just need a 2005 reporting services in order to actually have the Report Builder application. It is targeted at business users who want to find and share information, answers to interesting questions. As I said, they don't necessarily know the physical representation of the database, but they understand the business processes, they understand the business data that is in the database, and they're able to formulate questions against that set of information. Report Builder uses a business model of the data, so the users are never directly connected to the database. They see metadata about the underlying database. And today we're going to look at both the end user tool, which is Report Builder, and the model designer tool, which is the tool that an administrator or model designer would use in order to create the metadata for Report Builder users. Report Builder is not a fully analytical client. It's not a replacement for pivot tables. Report Builder allows you to build reports and lay them out, but they're not interactive reports like in the same way that pivot tables are. You cannot switch directly while you're in live mode the different items in the axes. You can, of course, go back to design mode, and I'll show you this, in order to change the content in your reports, but again, it's not a fully analytical application. However, Report Builder is fully integrated with Reporting Services 2005, and all of the reports generated by Report Builder are just like any other Reporting Services report. So we'll talk about that as we go along also. Next slide is an architecture slide about Report Builder. In the middle, it should be something that's fairly familiar. These are the components of the SQL Server Reporting Services server. So there are some new components that come with Report Builder. In particular, for the server itself, there are two new capabilities. One is a drill-through capability and the query generation capability. As I said, Report Builder doesn't work directly off of the underlying database. It works off metadata about the underlying database. So in the middle on the server is where we do the translation between the metadata and the actual physical query that gets generated and run at the source system. In addition, there's a drill-through capability in Report Builder, which you'll see, and that drill-through capability is also generated on the server. So all of the heavy lifting that comes with Report Builder actually happens on the server. Report Builder itself is a client that allows you to manipulate the metadata, create the queries, and then once that's done, or the reports, that information gets sent to the server, and the server actually does all of the processing of the query and the reports, and the results come back to Report Builder. So that's the new server pieces. There are a couple of new pieces on the end user tool and on the administrator developer side. On the end user side, of course, is the Report Builder client, the actual application itself. And there's an item for Report Manager here because out of the box, Report Builder is launched from Report Manager, and I'll show you that. In addition, again, as I mentioned, there's a new Model Designer tool. And the Model Designer tool is a Visual Studio add-in similar to the other Visual Studio add-ins that come in with SQL Server 2005. It's part of the Business Intelligence Development Studio. And we'll see Model Designer. That's the tool that you will go to in order to generate the metadata that's used by Report Builder. And Report Builder type reports can also be developed using Report Designer. And we probably won't have time to see that, but at the end I might be able to talk about it a little bit so you can get a sense for how to do that. But basically, there's a new data source type that allows you to link into the Report Builder metadata so you can generate Report Builder type reports, meaning reports off of the business model in Report Designer. Okay, so let's move on. The Report Builder client itself is a Quick Once application. This is new to Visual Studio 2005. Quick Once is a way to deploy applications, and basically it allows the application Report Builder to sit on the report server and is managed by the report server. So there's URL addressability, which we out of the box link to Report Manager. And users basically go to a website. It can be ours from Report Manager, or it can be any website that you put up and provide a link to Report Builder from. So they'll see a URL, they'll click on it, and the Click Once system will go ahead and check the client's machine to make sure that the prerequisites, basically .NET Framework 2.0, is on the client machine. And once it does that, it will check to see if there are any previous versions of Report Builder and if they're up to date. And if the user has permissions to download Report Builder, and it will go ahead and download Report Builder onto the user's machine and launch Report Builder. So although it looks like a thin application often to a lot of people who see it from scratch, it is not. It is a Windows application, and it is not fully thin, but it is deployed from the report server via a URL. We designed Report Builder using very familiar paradigms from Microsoft Office. You'll see a lot of Excel and a lot of PowerPoint types of capabilities in Report Builder. And Report Builder supports tables, matrices, and charts, as well as text boxes and images at this point. We do not support multiple data sources in Report Builder or multiple data regions currently, but those are things that we're considering for the next release. And finished reports can be saved to the report server. So once you create a Report Builder report, as I said before, it's just like any other Report Builder, any other reporting services report, meaning that Report Builder just generates RDL, the report definition language. And the only difference between a Report Builder report and a standard reporting service report that you would create in Visual Studio is that the Report Builder report does not have a SQL query, right? It just has the metadata that gets translated to the SQL query or the MBX query in the Report Builder case. And that is what is stored in the RDL rather than a direct query itself. So rather than talking more about it, let me go ahead and show you and do some demos of Report Builder.
Carolyn, before you hop into your demo, I'm just going to ask that you go try to speak up just a little bit more. I have a few people who are having a hard time hearing you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so on this machine I've got Report Manager started, and those of you who are familiar with reporting services, this is the web application that we ship out of the box. that shows you the report catalog. And you'll see that in Report Manager there's a new button on the top in the toolbar called Report Builder. And Report Builder is launched by that button. So when I click the button, again, it's verifying that I have the right permissions and that I have the prerequisites and downloading Report Builder if I don't have it. And once it downloads and starts the application, you can see that on the right-hand side I've got a list of items or data sources that I can use to create reports from. And this list of data sources is actually, again, not physical connections to the databases, but actually connections to the metadata that's been created using Model Designer. So it's a business representation of the data. And we'll go ahead and use AdventureWorks and click OK. And once you've selected a data source, there are several things about the Report Builder client that I should point out. First is, on the left-hand side is the place where you go to navigate the items in the actual model. So you can see that models contain entities, which are similar to tables, but not necessarily one-to-one mapping with physical tables. So in this particular data source, I have entities that represent customers, employees, products, purchases, sales, and those of you who are familiar with AdventureWorks, this is basically the AdventureWorks sample database that comes with SQL Server 2005. And as I'm clicking through each of these entities, you'll see that the fields list, or the actual items that I have to work with, are shown below the entities list. And so, for example, employees can be described by their ID number, their title, there's some information about their personal information, their first and last name, their quotas, and so forth. If I go to products, you'll see that products can be grouped by subcategory and category. They have prices and lists and weights and start dates and end dates and so forth. So again, at the top of the entities are the things in the underlying database, and then the fields are the descriptive items for each of those things. In the middle is the actual design surface for Report Builder. The design surface is modeled mostly after PowerPoint, so you can go ahead and you can see that there are some default items that are added to the design surface when you first bring up the application. And I can go ahead and click and add a title to my report, so I can say this is my new report. And in the middle is the actual drag and drop area where you go and create the actual report itself. So right now let's go ahead and create a simple sales order report by salesperson. When you're working with Report Builder, you can interact both with the entities and with the fields individually. So when I'm hovering over an entity, you can see I can double click on an entity, and that will add the default items for that entity. So the person who designed this particular model marked in the model that the default fields for the model are, for the employee or the salesperson, is the national ID number, the first name, the last name, and the email address. That's set in the model, or you can go ahead and directly work with the fields themselves. So if I say I want to group my salespeople by their territory, rather than double-clicking on territory, I can go ahead and just select the name of the territory down in the fields list and drag that over. And you can see that I can put it to the left, and on the top are these gray tabs that specify the grouping information in the report. So this particular report is currently got a grouping for territory and a grouping for salespeople. For each salesperson, I'd like to look at the sales information. So I'll go ahead and go down and grab the number of sales orders and drop that into the right. And when you have a measure, and this is again specified in the model, measures are added to the report, and when they are, subtotals are automatically added also. So we recognize the difference between a scalar attribute and a measure type of attribute. So I've got the number of sales orders for each salesperson, and I'm going to go ahead and also add the sum total due to the right. So for each salesperson, I'd like to know the number of sales orders for that person and the amount of each of those, of all those sales orders combined. Once I have the actual information that I want in my report, I can go ahead and add a filter to the report. So this will limit the amount of information that comes back from the database, and I'm going to go ahead and limit for sales orders in a particular date range. And I'll go ahead and expand order date. And you can see that in the model, when you have a date, we actually automatically create these variations for the date, so your users don't have to go through and define them. and that's automatically generated. If you don't like them, you can remove them from the model. So I'll say I want order year. And when I added in order year, you can see I get a drop-down list. And again, that's also specified in the model. So if you have an item that has a small number of instances that that can easily fit in a drop-down box, you can set it to be that. And if there are many instances, then there's a different UI that you can use in order to help your users find the information that they need. So I've got order year, and I'll just go ahead and also add one for order month. And so I'll select order month is 6, so I want sales orders for salespeople who have orders in the June of 2003. And I'll click OK. This is a very simple report and a very simple filter. And of course, there are many other things that you can do, but we'll go ahead and run this report right now. But actually, before I do that, I wanted to point out on the bottom of the report, you can see that we actually automatically put in a placeholder to show you the user the number of the rows that come back, and also a restatement of the filter that the user has created. So you can see I've got sales orders with all of order year equals 2003 and order month equals 6. So in order to run this report, all I'm going to do is click the Run Report button. And again, all I've done in Report Builder is build the metadata that gets sent to the server. The server actually translates that metadata to the actual physical query that gets run, sends that off to the SQL, in this case, the SQL data source where the database is, retrieves the results, and sends the results to Report Builder. So I've got, for each territory, the salesperson, and for each salesperson, the number of sales orders and the sum amount of each of all the sales orders for that salesperson in that month. When you're in Report Builder, one of the nice things about having a business model underneath the application is that we understand all of the different relationships between the data in your reports. So as you can see, as I'm hovering over and I'm going through this report, items in the report, some of them are clickable, and that's set in the model again. And what that does is when I click on an item, the context of the report that I just came from gets sent to the report server, and we automatically generate a drill down report for that particular thing that the user clicks on. So right now I'm looking at the 7 sales orders for the salesperson that I was just looking at. And I can drill down and look at a particular sales order by clicking on the sales order number. And your users can go ahead and keep exploring the data in this way. So when you create a Report Builder report, really you're creating a starting point for analysis. So I've got this particular sales order. These are all the different attributes for that sales order. I can go back and navigate to a different salesperson and look at the orders for Rajit, who has 4 orders. And I can say, I want to look at the actual purchase order or the order date or that particular sales order. So again, you can continue to navigate wherever there is a relationship defined in the model between the entities in the report. You can continue to navigate and click through and get the details for that item. Okay, so let's go back and create another report. And this time I'll create a matrix report. And I'm not going to save this one, but I'll save a later one to show you how that works. So this is my new matrix. And let's just create a simple matrix report. And let's do products. Group by the subcategory. I actually want this to the left. I'll just move it over. And the category. And then for each product, subcategory, and category, I'm going to see the sales for that product. The line totals. And I'm going to group on the columns by date again. So I'm going to group by the year and then the month. So you can see I've got my groupings across the top. I've got product grouped by subcategory and category. I've got order year and then order month. And I've got the totals for each of my products. And let's go ahead and filter this. Well, let's go ahead and run it real quick. Again, it's sending all that metadata to the report server. And this is a fairly large report because there are quite a few products and categories in the underlying database. And the reason why I wanted to show this to you before I created the filter is because I can show you the expand and collapse capability. Report Builder automatically adds the expand and collapse that's available in reporting services. So when you create a report, you can turn this off, of course. The groupings will be collapsed, and your users can then drill down and see the details for each of the items that they are interested in looking at, but they see a high-level view up front. So that's automatically added to matrices in both the columns and the rows. So let's go back and show you a slightly different filter. And in this case, we can filter on the products. And we'll filter for category is clothing. And let's look at sales orders in a particular year again. So in Report Builder, there are many things that you can do in a filter itself. This is a fairly simple filter again, but you can, of course, have a empty or equals or in a list or in a filter. This one may be a little more interesting. You can get greater than, less than, from, to. There are actually quite a few dates, so if I go ahead and actually add in the order date itself, we have a set of relative dates, so you can get today, tomorrow, months ago, last month, this month. All of those are predefined, so you can go ahead and do that. And actually, I'll get rid of this condition, and let's say I want the order date, and I want, actually, those are point-in-time dates. They're also range dates, so I want the last n years, because it's an old database. And I'll say I want the last 2 years. And go ahead and run that report. So you can see I get 2004 and 2005 because that's the data that's in the underlying database. So that gives you an example of some of the date range capabilities that we have in Report Builder also. So let's go back and I'll create a quick chart to show you all the 3 different kinds of reports that Report Builder creates. So in a chart, and this is the same charting capability as in Reporting Services Report Designer. It's the same control, so if you're familiar with the Report Designer, all the functionality that's in Designer is also in Report Builder. And I'll say this is sales by year. So in order to create a chart, all you have to do is drag and drop into the drop areas here also. So let's do sales territory and number of sales orders, and we'll group those by the order year. And you can go ahead and I can make this bigger, and I'll just change the chart type to a line chart. And I'll move the legend because we don't have too much information in this chart currently. Okay, so go ahead and run this report. So you can see the sales orders, the number of sales orders by the axes. Didn't show up because it's probably not big enough. Down a little. And we'll turn the legend back on and put it on the bottom. And again. So you can see the years that they are. Okay, so let's go ahead and do something a little more interesting in terms of filtering capabilities. I'll create another table and show you some of the more advanced features of Report Builder. So I'm going to generate a customer list for a marketing type event. I want to specify or get customers who have a specific type of behavior and be able to email them and send them a promotion. So I'm going to go ahead and grab customers. And customers are identified by their account number, their customer type, and their name. And I actually don't need the type, so I'll just remove that to save some space. I'm going to grab their email address so I can email them at the end of my, when I've generated my report and gotten the information I want. And I'm going to group customers by their territory also so that I can easily get the information to the right people in the right territories. And I'm going to grab the number of sales orders and the amount of those sales orders again. Okay, so I'm going to go to the filter, and I want customers, let's do who live in a specific area. So I want customers with addresses, actually customers, sales orders, and I want to look at their bill to address and grab the state province, for example, and I can get a list instead of just a single value. So I'll just select some of the states. Oregon, Oklahoma. Okay, so I've got a couple of states in different territories. You can see the list. I want customers in this list, and also I want them to have purchased something in a specific date. So in the year 2003, I would like them to have, oh, actually, let me start over. In this case, what I want to do, in order to show you something a little bit later on, I'm going to talk about this little checkbox which is on the bottom of this the filter condition. I could have just run the report exactly the way that I had specified it before, and what I would have gotten is all of these sales orders for the customers who had sales orders who lived in those states that I selected. What I actually want is I want all of the customers and not just the ones who had sales orders. So there are basically two types of reports that you can do, right? There are summary reports where basically you're getting data where there is information in the database about all the different types of conditions that you've entered. And then there's list reports, and in this case I want to do a list report. I want to retrieve all of the customers in that particular territory. And when I do that, I can just unclick this particular little checkbox, and I'll get a report that's a customer-based report rather than allowing the data to actually go down and filter through to the sales orders and get only customers with sales orders. So this way I'm going to get all customers, and I want customers, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to sales orders and their bill to addresses and grab the state province and switch this to in a list and select those states again, or some set of states. Okay, so I've got a set of states that I want customers with any bill to address in this state province, and I want sales orders where the order year is 2003, and in 2003 I want them to have purchased a mountain bike, so that's actually a subcategory. So you can see as I'm creating, there are a couple of things that are going on as I'm going through and creating this filter. First of all, in the entities list, you can see the relationships between the items that I've selected. So I've started on customer, I've grabbed some information from sales orders, I've gone to sales and then to the products and looked at the products for that for those sales. And as I'm building this filter, you can see there are groupings in the filter. So I've got customers with any bill to address and any sales orders in order year equals 2003 and products with a specific subcategory. I'm going to go ahead and continue adding a very similar clause down here with a slightly different grouping. I want sales orders in 2004 and in 2004 I want them to have purchased some kind of clothing. So I can just add that to this particular grouping clause. So now I have a fairly complex filter where I'm asking for sales in 2003 of any mountain bikes and sales in 2004 of clothing. And instead of and, I can always go ahead and change the and to an or in any of the places where that's available. So now I've got customers who live in this area, and they could have bought a mountain bike in 2003 or any clothing in 2004, and they will meet this criteria. So I'll go ahead and say OK. And let me make this a little bit larger so you can see the restatement of the filter. Now that I have the filter that I want, I'm going to go ahead and run this report. So again, I should receive a list of all the customers, and for each customer, I'm going to see the sales that match the criteria that I've selected. So these are sales of bikes or clothing in the 2 different time frames. And you can see the different territories that they belong to, and those are the customers and their sales that meet my criteria. So I can go back and show you also that for each of these items, I can get, in this case, this shows me customers who meet this criteria and all of their sales orders. And instead of seeing all of the sales orders, actually this is what's going on as I'm unchecking that filter checkbox down here. I get customers who meet my criteria, but I see all of their information. Instead of seeing all their information, I can go ahead and say I want to look at sales of a specific type of product for each customer instead of all sales. So in this case, I want the totals for sales of accessories, for example. So I can manipulate each of the lists and also each of the measures separately. So I've got a list of customers with this particular behavior. For each customer, I've got all of their sales orders, and I want to look at just the sales of accessories to these customers. So I can right-click and say Edit Formula, and go ahead and double-click on Sum Line Total. And you can see the relationship of this particular measure to the entire query. So from customer, you go to sales orders to sales, and I'm looking at the sum line total for each sale. At the sales order level, I want to apply a filter and say I want to look at only sales orders where there was some sale of an accessory, right? So I'll select accessories, click OK, and click OK. So right now I'm going to show all sales orders for each customer, and also only the sales where sales where there were some kind of accessory was also sold. So I'll click Run Report. So you get a lot of granularity in terms of what information you want to pull back. So I can see that I've got a number of sales orders for these these customers. I get the sum total due for each customer, all of the orders that they've ever placed, and also just the total where the order includes some kind of accessory. And you can see that accessory sales, orders with accessories, are smaller than the total orders for those customers. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can also go ahead and show you some sorting and grouping. So I'll click on sorting and grouping, and I will sort by territories, and let's sort descending. And I can also page break by territory. So for each territory, I'm going to put it on a different page and see each of the different territories on a different page. Click OK and run that report. So you can see that the Southeast doesn't have that many customers. So I've got the page that has the Southeast customers, and then the Northwest has a lot of customers. I picked a lot of states from the Northwest. And as I keep going through, at the end of my report, I should see the Northeast as a separate page also. So I've gone back. And you can go ahead and navigate the report in the same way as you do on the report in the Report Manager. All the capabilities that are in Report Manager are also available here when you're viewing a report. So you get the page navigation, the printing capability, the preview capability, and also the exporting capability. So again, all the same capabilities that are in Report Manager for viewing and exporting a report are also available directly here in Report Builder. Okay, so that gives you some idea of how to interact with Report Builder and the types of reports that we can build. Let me go back and do a quick time check. And go back to my slide deck. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on so I can get a chance to show you the Model Designer. So in your slide deck, I've added an image of Report Builder so that if you're going to print out this particular slide deck, you'll be able to see that. So quick review of what we've just seen. Report Builder reports, again, are just like any other reporting services report. And actually, let me go ahead and go back to that sharing slide. Now that I have this report, I'm going to go ahead and save it. I did forget to save. And when I click Save, you can see that Report Builder, because it's deployed from the report server, understands what server it came from, so it will automatically save back to that report server. So I've got my new report and save. And now when I go back to Report Manager, I can just refresh the page, and I'll see my new reports right here. And just like any other reporting services report, it can be run, and you can add subscriptions, you can schedule it, you can export it, you can do all of the normal things that you would do with a reporting services report. Okay? So the only difference, again, between a reporting services report and a report builder report, a standard reporting services report, is that the report builder report will not contain an actual query. It contains the metadata from the model that gets used to generate the query on the server at the time that the report is executed. But everything else is the same. You can manage the report builder reports using the same APIs and secure them through the same APIs as you would any other reporting services report. Okay? And I showed you infinite drill through, which is a capability where you're viewing a report builder report to click through and get related data about the item that you click through to. The server generates these reports on the fly. It uses the context of the original report, and these reports can actually be customized for each drill through, for each entity in the model. You can specify 2 drill through targets. If you don't like the ones that we generate by default, you can change both the fields that are in that particular, the default report, or you can actually upload your own report and link it in to the entities and have our system be able to handle your custom drill through report. Users can continue to explore the data once they see an item that they're interested in, but just note that the drill through feature is an enterprise-only feature, so you'll need enterprise version of SQL Server 2005 in order to do the infinite drill through. Okay, so let's move on to Model Designer. Now that we've seen the client and the way that you can interact with the metadata in the models, let's go ahead and look at the tool that gets used to generate that model. The Model Designer is a new project type, again, in BI Development Studio. You can define entities, fields, and roles in the model so that your users have familiar entities, fields, and roles, and not necessarily the physical items that are in the underlying database. You can define calculated fields. The interface for defining calculated fields is similar to the one that I just showed you, and I can show it to you again. And you can set some model presentation capabilities, so you can specify the default width, the format of the fields, and the different types of ways that your users can interact with the fields without breaking the existing reports, and your users will then not have to set those every time they go through and create a report. The models can be auto-generated, and I'm actually going to show you an auto-generation of a report. You can actually do that either in Model Designer or on the report server if you create a new data source, and the data source is either a SQL Server or Analysis Services data source. You can see a button on the bottom of the data source that says Generate Model, and you can go ahead and use that to auto-generate a model and be able to get started right away with using Report Builder without having to spend a lot of time in Model Designer. Auto-generation, again, is against SQL Server 2000, 2005, and Analysis Services 2005 databases only. And I'll go ahead and show you Model Designer. So let me go ahead and close out of this. And I've already started Visual Studio just to make sure that I have the right size screen. And I'll just create a new project. And as you can see, that there's a report model project type, not the report server project, which gives you a RDL project, but a report model project. I'll click OK. And a report model consists of 3 different types of files: a data source view, and then the model information itself. I'll create a new data source. And this should look familiar for those of you who have worked with SQL Server 2005 data sources. I've actually got one to Northwind already defined, and I'm going to go ahead and use that one. Click Finish. A data source view, for those of you who have used Analysis Services 2005, this is the exact same data source view capability as in the Analysis Services cubes. And so we use the same data source view information to bind the model information to the physical database. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new data source view using the data source that I just defined, Northwind data source. You can select both tables and views to be included in your data source view. Right now I'm just going to select tables just to keep the model fairly small. And click Next and Finish. And I'll open the data source view so you can just see it. It's just a physical representation of the underlying database. You can see the predefined tables that are in the database, the keys, and the relationships that are defined. It's very, very important when you're creating a report model that you define two things in your actual data source view. Obviously, you need the underlying tables that you want to use, but it's very important to have the primary key well defined and correct for each of the tables. A lot of the queries that we generate depend on having a well-defined primary key in order to get the right answer, and also to have the relationships defined. If you don't have relationships defined in the physical database, you can create them directly here in the data source view. Without the relationships, there will be no navigation in Report Builder, so it's very important to make sure that you have both primary keys and relationships defined. Once you've done that, you can actually go ahead then and create the report model. Right-click and create a new report model. I'll use the data source view that I've just created. And there are a set of rules that you can uncheck if there are things that you don't want us to create while we're doing the auto-generation. I showed you some of the date variations. These are when you have a date field, we automatically generate the year, the month, the day. You can turn that off. There are a couple other things you can turn off. I'm just going to select the default for now. There are some statistics that we gather in order to create the metadata that's in the model. And these are not database statistics. They don't change anything about your physical database. They're basically what we're doing is sampling the underlying database to figure out the cardinality between the items, and also whether or not we should show drop-downs or select lists and things like that in the actual models. So once I've selected to do that, I can go ahead and run. And it'll go through and read through the metadata in the data source view and generate the underlying, generate the base model. It takes a minute. Okay. So what this prompt is asking you is basically we've written some information to the data source view that's changed it, and what we've written is the sampling information, and do you want to reload it? And I'll just go ahead and reload it. So this is the information that we created out of the box for this particular model. You can see I've got categories and customers. Those of you who are familiar with Northwind, this should be familiar looking. I have all these attributes. Let's go ahead and look at order, and you can see we generate the variations. And if I look at a measure, which is under order details, we've also generated the variations for the measures. So you get the sum, the average, the total, and so forth. Okay, so once you've generated the base model, you can go ahead and start refining the model the way that you want it to look when your users are looking at it. For example, I selected all of the tables, but this particular item is actually not very interesting for end-user reporting, so I can go ahead and delete it. And I'm just going to go ahead and save at this point and publish this model to the report server, and it'll deploy to the default report server, which I've already defined. And it succeeded. So now if I go back and launch Report Builder again, I should see a model that's called Northwind. And there it is. So I'm going to create a real quick query to show you some of the defaults. So I'm going to select and look at employees, and you can see that when I double click on employee, I'll get the last name, the first name, and the home phone for the employee. Those are the default fields that we selected. And when we auto-generated, we do a best guess for the fields that we want, that you may want for the default fields. And for each employee, I'm going to go look at the orders and the order details, and you can see we have the total unit price, the quantity, and the discount. So I'm going to go ahead and select the unit price, and you can see there's actually no basically a sum amount, which would be the unit price times the quantity. And I can define that as a new field here in my model, and I'll do that in a second. And I'll go ahead and just run this report. And I'm going to go ahead and do a click-through on the unit price to show you what's in this drill-through report. So for order details, you can see I've got the order date, the required date, the ship date, the ship name, the order freight, the product name. Those are the fields that we pick by default. And I can change this also in the underlying model. So let's go back and make some of those changes so we can get a more interesting and more end-user friendly model. So go back to here. And I'm going to click on employee first and look at the default fields for employee. And the default fields are defined. Let me make this a little bit bigger. In this set called default detail attributes, and you can see there are 3. The last name, the first name, and the home phone. Let's say I just want the last name and the first name. I can go ahead and remove home phone and click OK. And I can go ahead and go to order detail and create a new field, a calculation in this case. And I'm going to call it the new expression. And there are a set of functions that I can use, very standard functions. You got your aggregate functions, conversions, logical math functions, date and time functions. Right now I'm going to do a fairly simple one. I want just the sum of the unit price times the quantity, so I can get the amount. Right, so that's a fairly simple calculation. Click OK. You can see I got new expression. I'll just call this the sum amount. And I need to set some of the properties on this new calculation in order to make sure that it's handled correctly. I do want to enable the drill through. So when I'm using this particular field, I want to allow my users to drill through. It is an aggregate, so I need to change this to is aggregate so I can get the subtotals and it can be aggregated correctly. And it is nullable. And I can change the format because I know that this is a dollar amount, so I'm going to go ahead and say that it's a currency2, so standard .NET format strings. And I don't want it hidden, and I think that should be good. So I've created, and you can see that the data type has changed, and I now have this new field that I can use when I'm looking at order details. And finally, when you do a drill-through report, I can say that I want different details available in my drill-through report, which is actually the same collection as your default details. I can go ahead and add a couple more fields, for example. So for each drill-through on an order detail, I would like to also see, for example, the order country, the ship country. So I'll add that to the list. Click OK. And I'll save everything and redeploy. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and restart Report Builder. And I should be able to create the exact same report and see the changes that I've added. So I'll select Northwind. And now when I double click and add employee, you can see I just only get the last name and the first name instead of the phone number also. And if I go to order details, there's my new field. So I'll go ahead and add the old field that I had and the new field. And go ahead and run this report. So I see I have the formatting that I asked for in this particular field. When I click through, I've changed this particular report so that I should be able to get the go down a little bit. The ship country. So I've asked in this particular drill-through report to also have the ship country, and there it is on the right-hand side. So those are some of the very beginning types of things that you can do in your model in order to make it more useful for your end users. Let's go back to the slide deck. Obviously, I can't cover all of the different capabilities of the models, but there's some good tutorials, and Books Online has a lot of information about how to use the model capability. Let's go back to the slide deck. And talk about models, a little bit of review on models. Again, you can create entities, fields, and roles that are displayed in Report Builder. Models map items in the metadata to the underlying physical database via the data source view. And models are stored on the report server, so when you publish, they do get published to the report server. There's a new item type and new management APIs so that you can, via the APIs, create and add models also. Models can be secured at the model level, the entity level, the field level, and the row level. So in SQL Server Management Studio, which is the same place you go to manage and secure your reports, you can go ahead and secure models. So you can decide this particular user is able to see this model. They can see a particular entity or set of entities in this model, a particular field within that entity, and you can actually go ahead and add row-level type security. So if you only want salespeople in the Northwest to see the Northwest data, you can add an attribute that basically defines the Northwest set of data and grant the users in the Northwest access to that particular attribute, and then they will only be able to see data that is relevant to them. And that's a feature called security filters. So if you're looking up in the Books Online, look under security filters in order to get information about that particular item. Again, model security is managed through SQL Server Management Studio and not in Report Manager. So make sure you go to Management Studio in order to set security on models. And one of the things that we get asked often is what the difference is between Report Builder and Report Designer, and here are some of the really large differences. So Report Builder is targeted at business users, whereas Report Designer is targeted at IT pros and developers. As we said up front, Report Designer really gives you in-depth access to RDL, and you really need to know both how to write queries and understand RDL in order to use it. Report Builder is targeted at business users. They get to see a business model of the underlying database. They never actually write any SQL or any other type of query. They just interact with the metadata in order to generate the reports. Report Builder is for ad hoc reporting, and Report Designer is really about production reports. When you want to lay out specific types of data regions or items in your reports and you want to be able to nest them in a complex way, Report Designer is the way to go. Report Builder auto-generates queries using the semantic information or the metadata on top of the database, and Report Designer obviously allows you to go directly against those data sources. Report Builder gives you basic layout. Report Designer gives you very complex nested and banded layouts. Report Builder is a click-once application. It's easy to deploy and manage. And Report Designer is, again, a Visual Studio type of application, very similar to Model Designer. And Report Builder can only open Report Builder type reports, meaning that Report Builder cannot open any Report Designer reports that have a direct SQL query or an OLIDB query or any other of those data sources. We are working on adding support for Oracle in Report Builder so that you can go directly against an Oracle database. There will be a beta program for that support. If you're interested, you can go ahead and send me an email and we'll try to get you on the list for that program. We are still trying to decide when that capability will be rolled out, so hang in there and we'll let you know as soon as the beta program tells us how much more work we need to do on that feature. Report Designer, of course, can open any RDL report, including Report Builder reports. So if there's a capability that you're interested in Report Designer, your business users have created some interesting reports, but they need some additional capabilities that a designer can add in. You can go ahead and open a Report Builder report in Designer and add that capability in. So in summary, Report Builder is our new ad hoc report design capability. It's targeted business users, it's based on the business model, and it is fully integrated with reporting services. And there's some great additional resources out there for you, so you can visit Technet for some technical information. The reporting services site is right here. You can go over there and find a lot of documentation and also the matrix of features that come with each of the editions of SQL Server. There's a lot of information on forums. And also, those of you who know one of our main developers, Bob Myers, he has a great blog available, and this is the URL. You can go there. There are some great articles that he has just posted on how to use Model Designer, some of the best practices for using Model Designer, and also some great information about how Report Builder works. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Tracy, and we'll go to the question and answers section.
All right. Thanks, Carolyn. Remember, for more information, everyone can print a PDF of today's session. To do that, just go to the File menu in your navigation bar. We will be getting to the questions and answers shortly. Please do feel free to submit them now. I also will be posting a survey. Please do take a moment to fill that out for us. We do appreciate any feedback you have. And for any upcoming or previously recorded webcasts, you can go to www.microsoft.com/webcasts. Or if you have any webcast content ideas, if there's something that you haven't seen yet, you can follow this link here. Today's webcast was presented using Microsoft Office Live Meeting. You can get a free 14-day trial by visiting the following link. And for filling out the survey today, you will be automatically entered in to win this 40 gigabyte MP3 Windows Media Player. It gives you a little incentive to do that for us. And here is the survey. Should be posting in a moment. Please do follow either if you're registered online or if you registered otherwise. Use those two and fill that out for us. And I'm going to hand it back over to Carolyn to wrap up with the questions.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and answer some of these questions right now so you can all hear. There are some really great questions out there. The first question is, SQL Server 2005 available? Yes, it is. You can go ahead and be able to get that. You should get it. If you go to, I think MSDN, you can get the evaluation version, and then you can be able to go and purchase that also. One of the first questions about Report Builder is, can I add parameters to the report? That's a great question, and we didn't get to cover that, but yes, you can add parameters. What you want to do is when you're creating a filter for a report, on the filter clause, go ahead and click on the name of the clause. So for example, if you have country equals USA, click on country and select prompt. And that will create a parameter automatically in Report Builder that your users can then set when they're actually running the report. Does BI come with the trial SQL Server 2005? What programs do you open to begin creating reports after you have a database completed? So I'm not exactly sure what this question is, but if you get SQL Server 2005, you do get the BI Development Studio, and you can use that in order to generate a report. When you install reporting services, you automatically get Report Manager, and you can go to Report Manager, create a data source, and point it at your database that you'd like to do Report Builder reports off of, and generate a model similar to the way that I just showed you, and then you can go ahead and start reporting. Okay, so that's the same question. Is it possible to create a combination report, table and chart in one report? That's a great question. In the version that we have shipped in 2005, you can only create single data region reports. We are going to work on multiple data region reports in the next version, and we're not exactly sure when that will ship, but that will be coming up in the next version. What's the difference between the Report Builder that I download via the URL and Report Builder that I have in Visual Studio? So that's the Report Builder in Visual Studio is our designer product. So there are actually two tools that you can use to create reporting services reports. Report Builder, which you saw me demo today, and then Report Designer. And Report Designer is actually our advanced tool. So when you're using Report Designer, you need to create the queries directly. You need to understand RDL and be able to manipulate the data regions yourself rather than having the point-and-click capabilities that come with Report Builder. So there are two different tools that are targeted at different users. Another parameters question. I should have showed that. Create a report based on a stored procedure. So that's a good question. Stored procedures are not supported in this version. You can add a link to a stored procedure in a data source view, but those are not supported by Report Builder in this release. Drill down feature is only available in Enterprise Edition. Yes, that is true. You need Enterprise in order to do the drill down feature that I showed you. The expand and collapse feature comes automatically, but the drill down feature is basically the thing that we call infinite drill through that is Enterprise only. Could I create custom charts using SQL Server 2005 using the visual editor in Excel? I'm not sure, but what you mean by this question. But basically, the charting capability that's in reporting services is not the same as the charting capability that's in Excel. The charting capability that's in reporting services is based off of Dundas charts, and they also have an advanced charting capability if you go directly to them. And you need some additional charting capability that doesn't come directly with reporting services. They do have an advanced chart control that you can add to your reports directly from them. The next question is, Report Builder is included with SQL 2005. Yes, that is correct. You do need SQL 2005 in order to use Report Builder. How to give some super users access to Report Builder, Management Studio, Security, and Report Manager. In order to actually download Report Builder, and this is actually a different question that I can see on the list, you need the Report Builder permission. So when you go to Report Manager or in Management Studio, when you're installing a new SQL Server 2005, you should see a new Report Builder role. And you can grant users access to the Report Builder role in order to give them access to Report Builder. There's really no difference between a basic Report Builder user and an administrator report user. If you have an administrator in your group, you will want to give that administrator additional reporting services rights, like the ability to manage reports and the ability to schedule and so forth. But there is only one Report Builder role, and once you give that permission, then the user has the Report Builder capability. If you need to secure the model and items in the model themselves, then you can go ahead and use model security in order to do that. Can you limit the amount of data in the model that the Report Builder can return? It's a good question also. There is one feature that we created that basically does not allow users to run reports if a filter is not specified. So you can require that your users specify a filter when they're accessing an entity that has a lot of instances, but you cannot specifically say that reports that return more than 1,000 rows cannot be returned. So you can go ahead and say in the model, this particular entity, when it's being used in a report, must have a filter associated with it, but you cannot specify a specific limit for the report results that could come back. When I launch Report Builder from a URL, is that a one-time download, or does it download each time I want to use Report Builder? It is a one-time download. When you go ahead and get Report Builder, you'll get it once unless for some reason you've cleared out your cache. And the Click Once basically caches any Click Once application into a Click Once cache. And if that cache gets cleared out, you will end up re-downloading Report Builder. But in general, no, it's a one-time download. And unless, of course, you also deploy a new version, and then it'll check the version. If your version is old, then it will re-download. But otherwise, it's just a single download. And I think that's all of the questions. If there are additional questions, I'll hang out, and you can go ahead and keep submitting them, and I can answer them privately if you're interested.
Sure. What we can do is we'll hang on a little bit afterwards and answer those via text. So I just want to extend a special thanks to Carolyn for presenting today, and also thank you to the audience for attending today's Technet webcast. This does conclude today's session. The audience may now disconnect from the audio portion of this presentation.